What's going on, everybody? I did something this morning that I don't normally do. I broke one of my cardinal rules of doing reviews, and I watched somebody else's review. And after I watched that one, then I was like, wow, really? And then I watched another one that somebody did on the same product, and then another one, and then another one. So I have spent about the last hour plus watching reviews of a product, and they went from this is a piece of shit, throw it in the garbage, to I really like this is a great one. So where do I come in on this? Do I tell, I mean, they're all their opinions, so they're all legit, but I guess mine's somewhere in the middle of all of that. Product I'm talking about, this cloutank C1. Probably seen it all over the place. Lots of reviews being done on it lately. It's from China. It says patent pending on it. People seem to be really enthralled with that little thing on the side of the box to guarantee it's an authentic or whatever. It does come with a nice little instruction card inside of it to tell you how to fill it and how to put it together. Comes with the tank, which looks like this. Not a bad looking tank. Proprietary mouthpiece on there, but not a bad looking tank at all. Got a couple of spare heads plus one installed. Let's take a vape off of it once while I gather my thoughts. The vape's pretty decent. I mean, it's a tank. Has a 2.5 ohm atomizer head inside of it. I have it on the Pro Vary at 5 volts, because at 2.5 ohms needs heavier voltage for me. I mean, some people, especially when you start, you don't really need much power. Just the vapor alone was enough to, when you first quit smoking. And that's who uses a lot of these things. I mean, there's people who have been vaping long time that still use them too. But a lot of people graduate into rebuildables and that sort of thing. Or just use atomizers, or I don't care, use whatever you want. So one of the things that I see people complaining about is this right here. There is a gap when you screw it down onto stuff. And it doesn't necessarily screw down on some standard 510 things. Like, I guess the people were trying to screw it to, DNA mods and stuff like that. And the reason why it doesn't is because you can see the base on there. It has that center pin sticks out. You can see it sticking out below the 510 connection on it. So I thought, everyone seems to have a complaint about that. And I know that on my Genesis atomizers and mechanical mods, I tend to get things sit as flush as I can too, because I just think it makes it look more seamless and makes it look better. Problem with that is, and I'll show you this when we get up close, is that it needs to have that sticking out below there because that's where the airflow comes through. And I saw that quite a few people too. They're like, oh, revolutionary airflow, this, that. I don't understand exactly what they're talking about. Well, I guess that I do, because I actually took the time to take the thing apart and investigate with it a little bit and find out what was going on with it and why it's put together the way it is and what some of the drawbacks are to it, and not just 5 minutes, take a couple vapes off of it and tell you whether it vapes good or not. Because I think that that's a lot more important when it comes to something like this, because something else is I could have made a drinking game out of people saying pro tank. But it's a tank. There's lots of tanks out there. Maybe the Pro Tank might be the one to compare things to, but I can't say that I necessarily love the Pro Tank to pieces either. Its bottom coil, it vapes good, but I don't vape a Pro Tank all the time. So when I set this down, when I'm not going to vape it, what do I have to do? I have to flip it upside down, because if I don't flip it upside down, then that coil and wick will continue to wick juice, and I'll end up with a mess on the desk. Or if I have it screwed into a holder, it'll flood out the holder because the juice just continues to drop down because gravity keeps working on it. Okay, so ProTank's vape good, nothing wrong with a ProTank. You know, in a lot of ways, there's nothing wrong with this. But the complaint is that I have to tip it to feed it. And it says that because it's a top coil. It's not a bottom coil. That was so hard. That was so hard to feed it. Tip it again. So freaking rough. Okay. You know, what's a plus on one may be a minus on another, but what's a minus on this may be a plus on something else. You know, it's all relative. You know, it's your opinion, and, you know, love it or hate it or whatever. You're really just supposed to show what the pluses and minuses are. And if you want to compare it to something else, great. But for God's sake, it's not a piece of crap. So I'm going to take you up close and let you get a better look at it. Hold on just a second. Alright, so here are the pieces that come into play with it. And here, let me go ahead and show you that connection right off the bat, because that was kind of important. You can see that this one protrudes, the one that I've still got down there. And I don't know. There we go. You can see how it protrudes. Well, this one, I took the end of it off and I made it flush. Problem with that is that when you do screw it down all the way flush, then you have no airflow coming in, because the airflow requires these two channels, and for that to be a little bit longer. I only have 2 of these, and I'm a little bit afraid to grind that one off and see if I can reduce it some and still get decent airflow. But the airflow is good when it's original. Doesn't sit flush, but the airflow is very good when it's on the original. Alright, so this base does not come apart. It's a one-piece base. The problem that I have with the base is that there are 2 O-rings that are down here inside the bottom of this, and you can probably get them out, but they are a bitch to get out. I had them pop out on me the first time I took it apart and went to clean it, and when I went to put them back in, I was like, how do those go? So I wasn't quite sure exactly, and I ended up getting, one of them just fell back right into place, but then there's a smaller one I had to stretch over this little ledge right here, and then I had to kind of finesse with them to get them in place. But I don't know if those are ever coming out again, and that could be a little bit troublesome when you go to clean it. So there's that. The tank, nice glass tank. There is a top and a bottom on this tank. If you try to put the top in first, it's not going in all the way. Put the bottom in first, it does go in all the way. The next piece you have is this cap, and it is threaded on that central piece right there, and that screws together and holds the whole tank together. So you can put that together nice and tight. Then you have an atomizer head, and I saw people noticing it has these neat little holes. Let me move that so you can see it. It has a hole right there in the top. The hole isn't in the top there like it is on other stuff. Well, the hole's right there on the side. With this being a top coil, what those holes there to do is to allow air in. If you had a hole in the top right there, you could get spitting. And with as close as your mouth is, because once you take this and screw it in, and you put your mouthpiece on there, your mouth is right there on top of it, and you could end up with hot juice inside your mouth. So they've changed the airflow dynamics of it and put the holes on the side so that if that atomizer does spit, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to hit you in the mouth and burn your mouth, but it still allows the vapor production to happen. The coil itself, or the atomizer head itself, is the same thing as what a ProTank is, or a VV Nova tank is, really. There were a couple of wicks that were laying on top of the coil, which I, not real a fan of that, because it sort of gets in the way of the vapor production, but it keeps you from getting dry hits, because it helps keep everything wet. So you're not going to just burn the atomizer right up on it. Comes apart, it could be easily rebuilt. I have a video for rebuilding. It has a little cap that snaps on the top right there, for the post, and that's actually got a little bit of knurling so that when you're putting it in and out, you've got something to grab a hold of there. And then it has the little grommet that goes down over the top of it. So this would be a great one to build with coil. It does have a pretty good gap right there. So if you go pulling wicks out of it, you can end up, you're probably not really going to get flooding in it because it doesn't have anywhere to flood with that short of a wick. And with having to tip it to feed it, it it just returns to its regular spot anyway. So it works pretty good. But there's your big thing right there, is what I've seen people complaining about that, and having to tip it to feed it. But six of one, half dozen of another. Like I said, a pro tank will flood like crazy and gurgle and hiss and all that stuff, and that's not a problem I've had with this one at all, with the Cloud tank, as it does not. I have had no gurgle and no flooding and no leaking out the bottom or anything of that nature. Tip to feed, tip back down, take a few vapes off of it. You're not going to be able to sit there and freight train it for 10 straight hits or something without feeding, but most people take 2 or 3 hits and then they take a break and breathe a couple of breaths that don't contain vapor, and then they and when you're actually taking a breath and getting some oxygen into your lungs and not just vapor, flipping it upside down is not that hard. And who keeps their mod completely upright all the time anyway? Mine's stand. I have them in stands and they stand a lot, but when it's full, you really don't even have to do much. Just when you put it up to your mouth and vape it, it's going to be feeding. It's when you get down below, down to that half tank or below, that you're really going to have to do much tipping. When it's full, it's not going to require it all that much. And just a second to wet the wicks, really. Maybe a little bit longer if you're using some real thick juice. This is VG, high VG that I have in here. And I vaped a tank through it with, it didn't have any problems, so I don't know. Alright, that's all I really have to show you up front. I kind of wish I wouldn't have tried to mess with that pin and make it flush, because now I have a useless tank, but I guess I have spare parts, so I don't have one to give away. I thought I'd give one away, but that one's not going to do anybody much good. So, back up for final thoughts. Alright, so you've heard my little bit of a rant about, I don't know, maybe I don't always do the best reviews either, I don't know, but after watching all of those and seeing how it was all over the board, and there wasn't really anybody that experimented or looked at it or tried to figure out how to make it work better, and I see modding of all kinds with pretty much everything that comes out. I was just a little bit annoyed with that, from one guy throwing it in the trash to somebody else saying it vaped great. Well, the guy that vaped it great, he wasn't even bitching about the gap in there. He screwed it onto something. He's like, yeah, it's got a little bit of a gap, so what? And he's vaping it. He tips it, just like the instructions say. Tip every few hits. He was doing it just like the instructions. Seemed like a fairly new guy. He had no problems with it, so that's what I thought was funny. I've seen other products like that too, where it's like the more experienced people and the more experienced vapors or reviewers or whatever, they get real critical on something. But somebody new, they read the instructions or they see what it is, they don't seem to have a problem with it. They know how to use it just fine. So that's really all I have. I'm just rambling at this point. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll catch you again next time.